Do you support the Uptown South Master Plan?
Not explicitly. I had a question in another forum recently where they asked, should this move forward? And my response was, I don't think the town council should have absolute yes or absolute no on this. The best way to move forward is to issue revenue bonds based on the plans that are out there. That way, revenue bonds are based on, this doesn't come from the town in general, it comes from specific sources. So I'll just say, rents from Uptown South, 10% of all those rents will go towards these bonds. I'm just making that up. I have no idea if that would be a good example or not. That way, if people think that's a good idea, it's good that we have that housing will be profitable, then the people who have that vision and buy those bonds will benefit without the people of the town being on the hook if it doesn't go well.
So is that example specifically for the housing piece of Uptown, not the overall design?
It depends on what all eventually goes in.
Okay.
If it's retail, I know there's been talk of a grocery store, a portion of the sales tax, or things like that.
So the design of it is not something that's horrible to you.
Again, it's more how it's being implemented. I think it's much too top-down. But if people are willing to, private interests are willing to pony up the money for it, then they can do that.
Top-down? I mean, didn't they gather enough public input on this?
It's come out recently that the plan was largely in place before the more overt public input. It was, okay, what do we want? What are we going to put in? Okay, let's kind of rough out the design. Okay, now let's have people come in and cheerlead for it.
Okay.
That's kind of how the town does most things these days.
One of the suggestions in that plan is for a large footprint public building, potentially a library, but not necessarily a library. What do you think that large footprint public building should be?
I don't know that we necessarily need one. Again, it's been, as you said, it's decided, we want a big government building. Well, unless you say, we need a new library, or we need, I'll just say, a much bigger jail for all the people that are going to the dispensary, or whatever. If it's just, we need a government building, the question then is why, or what?
So other candidates have, do we need a library? Does the town need a new library?
I would lean yes. I was on the library board, and at the time they had certain metrics of, a certain size town needs a certain footprint. However, those metrics, I will admit, are somewhat dated. The building itself is also somewhat dated, so it's a good idea, but that kind of comes back to, it's a nice to have. It's a want. We should address the streets first. We should address the sewers first. I personally like the library and would like a larger, bigger, newer library, but that's something that should be put out for more public input as opposed to just, we want a big footprint building and we're going to put the library there.
So if new library, and if it's the right size, who pays? How much should be privately raised? How much should be a public investment? Everyone running is saying it should be a mix of that, by the way.
Yeah, definitely. Again, I was on the library board when they were first kind of investigating this, and they had the foresight to start the Normal Public Library Foundation. They knew that down the road, we were getting too much debt, and they would get a lot of pushback, and rightfully so because of the amount of debt. It's like, we already have these wants. I think the library should have been higher on the want list versus what we already have, but until you pay for those other wants, public investment in the library should not be excessive. I do know that if it were to move to the Uptown South area, they would sell the current location and probably make a pretty penny on that. But as far as an ideal mix, it depends. If we get tons and tons of private money, then If the private money will support a twice as big building with gold-plated walls, great. If we get next to no private money, then, I hate to say it, but we should limp along with the building we have for the time being until we can pay down the debt and afford new ones.
Let's return to the Uptown South housing piece again, just briefly. A question I've asked other people. One of the key needs identified in an EDC study is affordable housing. Should there be an affordable housing requirement or component to any housing development that goes into Uptown South?
That goes again back to policies and attitudes. If we don't have affordable housing, that's because the town of Normal has already decided we will not have affordable housing. Building regulations, setback regulations, size regulations, additional fire alarm requirements, additional inspection requirements. There was another one I can't come at the moment. But any one of these is not a big deal. But when you add them all up, basically the town has said we would much rather have nice housing that no one can afford than have affordable housing.
The town of Normal's standards for those things, though, were well within the range of normal compared to municipalities across the U.S. Are you saying that they shouldn't have those fire alarm and sprinkler requirements?
Everything's a balancing game. You can require every room have full set of sprinklers, its own fire extinguisher, its own, etc.
That's also not necessarily the town's call. I mean, there are statewide requirements for sprinkler systems in large buildings.
The town of Normal has shown recently that it's a home rule unit that can largely ignore state law.
Well, that statement is challengeable depending on the issue.
I agree. It depends on the specific statutes.